Last part of our morning is going to be a media panel, whether it's stories of residents coming together to improve their communities or new ways of working with open data. We believe civic tech has a lot to offer journalism, and as we've seen, journalists can be vital participants in the civic tech movement. Today we're joined by some of Canada's most prominent tech reporters who will lead our panelists in a discussion. So our panel members will be Gabe Sawhney, who we heard from before, Executive Director of Code for Canada, co-founder. Zeena Abdulla, who's the Director of the Ontario Digital Government Team. David Rauch, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Strategic Planner at the City of Edmonton's Analytics Centre of Excellence. And Becca Blazak, who's former Fellowship Program Manager at Code for America and 2016 Alumni Fellow at Code for Australia. So if our panel could come up. Moderating the panel today will be Luke Simcoe, who's our communications lead at Code for Canada. So Luke. And our journalists who will be asking questions for the panel. Matthew Braga, who's the senior technology reporter at CBC News. Doug Soltys, editor-in-chief and founder of BetaKit. And Jessica Smith-Cross, Queen's Park correspondent with the Canadian Press. So if our journalists could come up. Thank you so much for being with us. All right, take it away.
Great. So I'm going to hang out on the sidelines. But thanks again for coming. Thanks again to Shopify for hosting us. Thanks again to the government for helping launch Code for Canada. And thanks to Northern who let us share their office with them. That's really cool. As a former journalist, this is the part that I'm really excited about. And so we've got some of the leading tech reporters in the country, including Code for Canada and elsewhere. And it's going to be a round robin. Journalists are going to ask some questions. And we're going to get some answers. So I'm looking forward to what people are going to say. And we'll start with Doug.
I accidentally grabbed the mic first, so I'm happy to go. I actually want to start off with something that Mr. Matthew said off the front, the I love government, which I think is a really novel thing to hear, something you don't often hear in tech, but I think Canadians, we actually do like government a little bit more than we might begrudgingly admit, but with that affection comes maybe a larger sense of responsibility, and with this initiative, I want to maybe talk about maybe the tension or the opportunity between tech's kind of fail fast mentality and government's responsibility of like the social contract, compliance, any sort of social responsibility. And anyone who wants to take that can most certainly go.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really interesting concept, the notion of agility, prototyping, iterating towards an outcome and actually measuring at every step whether or not you're achieving that outcome. And in government, a lot of processes are structured in a different way. A lot of how governments and every organization until sort of the internet revolution conceived of technology as something, the way you build a battleship is how you build an IT system. And then suddenly technology changed, almost overnight in government time. And I think all organizations are sort of rushing to kind of adapt to that change, including government. And it's a really interesting concept because if you move fast, if you iterate, if you prototype, if you experiment, it allows you to test your policy assumptions on a small scale before building out something bigger. And in effect, it ends up being less risk to the people who are using your service. Because you know earlier if something is working or not, and then you can course correct. Whereas if you're doing it in kind of battleship mode, you only find out at the end.
Just to follow up, and I'll toss this to the better respected journalists on the panel. So is that just a cultural thing? Like government just is like used to building battleships, or is there an internal structure that leads them towards like schematics before experiments?
Okay. I think again, it's how technology was done and is done. And again, many large organizations is that you document specifications just like you would with a battleship, with a cathedral, roads and bridges are all done this way. And technology before, that was really the only way you could do it. And so things like decision making and capital spend models and procurement are all structured around this. And so that's why when you want to actually take a different approach, it's not just culture. You have to look at all of these other pieces and make adjustments to all of them to create space for that type of experimentation.
Did any of the other panelists have anything to say on the question?
Yeah. So I want to be careful because I'm not government, but I wanted to just share an observation from my fellowship, which was every piece of technology that the government department I was working with had procured, they had citizens' best interest at heart. They saw a gap in something that was happening in their constituency or in their place of residence, and they found a solution, or they found what they thought was the best solution for it. And they really, I think the key there is that even when technology fails, it was with people's best interest at heart. And what this fellowship is able to do is talk about, to sort of explore what into the sandwich is, really defining that problem earlier in that stage of building technology or the procurement process, digging into what people's needs are and why the problem that they're seeing is really occurring. And I think that gets skipped over a lot, which is that even when technology fails, they were trying to do the right thing.
Hello, everyone. One of the things I'm personally fascinated with is organizations that keep these big hulking legacy systems running, like stuff that's kind of been doing the same thing for decades on end. And I think this was kind of hinted at earlier in the day. And all the challenges that I think you have to deal with. I'm wondering, is this sort of one of the big challenges or sort of hurdles with trying to sort of modernize a lot of government systems, that you're just dealing with these sort of big legacy systems that need to work the way they work, and it's kind of hard to sort of change that momentum?
Yeah, there are definitely a few challenges that will need to be addressed all at the same time. Some of them are absolutely legacy IT. That the integration stage of fellows projects and of civic tech projects is one of the ones that we need to make sure not to fast forward through. We need to be planning ahead to make sure and working with all the stakeholders from day one to make sure that the parameters that we're using to understand what fellows are working on needs to be thinking ahead about what is this going to look like when we're actually putting it into place. What are the other systems that it needs to connect with? And so I think it's an incremental process. It needs to be around plugging into existing systems and having those transitions happen sort of over time and not all in one shot. But yeah, I mean, absolutely that those legacy systems are often part of the challenge.
I can speak a little bit more to that. One of the things that's been really, I think, impressive and surprising about, let's say, like the advent of open data and people using it as a city employee, sometimes I would find out about various assets that the city had in terms of data from the open data portal, because it was this centralized repository where information from every corner of the organization goes into a single place. And so I think when we started to have this really great user experience with an open data portal, it allowed us as city employees to be like, wow, did we even own this piece of information? And so it shows us, like, why do we have a better system that has a better user interface for citizens than we do for internal employees? So it's actually prompted a bunch of soul searching in new projects internally to do that kind of integration and have a system for employees as well.
I often find too, we have legacy systems in government, but the legacy systems aren't often an issue as much as the legacy process and policy. So the accretion, and I think the administration references, for half a century, the accretion of little rules. And then the system itself is just, it's old and it's also bonkers, it's incredibly complicated, but that's because of all the rules it has to express in the delivery. And so I think, again, it isn't really just tackling the system, it's tackling what caused the system to be like this, rethinking the policy. Why do we ask 250 questions for eligibility for this thing? Maybe we could ask 10. And the system is a lot simpler. And then you're not actually trying to rebuild a legacy system in, an old Frankenstein rebuilding into a new Frankenstein with newer technology. You're actually creating a much simpler system that
guys could talk about where the Ontario government needs the most help, what projects, what problems the fellows could be of most use on.
I can't speak to Ontario.
I mean, besides being an Ontarian and having some personal experience of this, but no more than any other Ontarian, you know, I can say that the challenges that we face as I'd say as residents are, I mean, everyone is going to have a different list, right? And there's certainly ones that we're going to see that, you know, that would come up more often than others. In Toronto, we talk a lot about affordable housing, we talk about transportation, certainly things like, challenges around healthcare, really great work that's been done recently around OSAP and other issues. I mean, I think that there are a lot of opportunities there. What's really interesting, though, and sort of in my role in the civic tech community, I get to see what are the issues that specifically coders and designers what are the ones that they focus on. And so through Civic Tech Hack Nights, we're able to see where are what do resident-led projects look like? What are the kinds of areas that they tend to connect with? And so certainly there are things around the budget, around helping make budgets clearer, more accessible to people, helping encouraging better ways for people to be providing feedback in budget times, and then citizen engagement generally. Like there's an enormous appetite among designers and technologists to help enable better information sharing and better kinds of communication between residents and government. So I think those are two of the most common kinds of projects that we see in the civic tech community.
Just to further what Gabe was saying, it's interesting because in the civic tech community, one of the interesting challenges is like there are developers who have skills and interests, and then in government there's governments who have capacity to partner with citizens and projects. And organizations like Code for Canada and other civic tech meetups are this really interesting place where like biodiversity really flourishes in places where two systems meet. And so when you have people who are able to bridge the gaps between capacity and interest in two different fields, that's when you're able to like basically like right-size your solutions. And while you can have priorities and like the government has their priorities and citizens have theirs, it's really exciting because in the end you probably have like 30 or 40 opportunities on both sides, and if you can connect up to do 5 of those, that's excellent.
As sort of a follow-up to those questions, what's the size or scope of the projects that a civic tech community can accomplish, or that the fellows can accomplish within their term?
I think that is dependent on a lot of different factors. I think I mentioned team dynamics in my talk. That contributes to the success of a team. And I think the relationship that a team holds with their government department is probably what drives what they can actually accomplish in that time. The more doors that open, the more access fellows are given from early on in terms of data or internal servers. The more success and the more momentum they'll be able to start driving from early on, and that can lead to really quick development of technology. Some examples of that in the States. Last year in Salt Lake City, a team of fellows launched a new case management system within 6 months. They were live, they had users, and they're changing the way that case managers in the public safety sector were interacting with people awaiting trial and on probation. And I think the keys to success there were strong support from the government partners. Everybody was on board. It was actually a smaller department, I think, which is sometimes helpful. Larger departments mean more relationships, and it's more to navigate. So it's a lot of buy-in from the beginning that drives that momentum.
And I mean, just a little bit on the sort of the different project scales between civic tech community initiatives and what fellows will be working on. One of the things that we hear so often at Civic Tech Toronto is like, oh man, I wish I could do this as my job. And so this is the fellows is an opportunity to do that, to go from working on projects during evenings and weekends to be doing it full time for the better part of a year. There's doing and to be doing that on the inside, right? Having that access, having that the credibility and the relationships. I think those are in addition to time, those are the real challenges for civic tech projects to move forward faster. But these kinds of projects are take a lot of iteration. That's why civic tech groups meet weekly, and so it's while I think fellows will have will be totally immersed and will have a lot of time to work on this. It's really difficult to kind of measure the size of a project for something like this, except maybe to say like how many iterations have you been through, and fellows will be able to iterate, I think, a lot faster and in much more substantial ways than civic tech groups can.
So I think Zeena wanted to say something, and then we'll pass it back to Doug.
Yeah, just something that we wanted to, even with our own digital team. Government is huge. It can feel like a labyrinth, even if you're on the inside already. And one of the things that we learned, even deploying people from our own team to the ministry to help out, is you actually have to be deliberate about creating the conditions for success. Right down to little details. You need whiteboard markers and post-it notes. And you need access to the frontline workers. We've even done this when we were working on student assistance. Is we flew out to Thunder Bay to talk to the front lines to understand what were they hearing from students. So being able to sort of help people navigate is key, and you can actually work on some pretty huge projects and get quite a lot done, really high touch stuff. Services people are accessing all the time, like trying to change your address or renew your driver's license. I mean, as long as you've got, it's almost like you got the State Department, you got your little embassy in that country, and they need a little help, they call you, you help sort stuff out. And so we've been playing that role with our own teams, and I think there's a lot that we can apply in that learning to how we create the right conditions so that fellowship teams can succeed in SECO.
So the question of open data came up earlier, and I think as more government processes go digital, there's always a conversation around privacy. But I think it's more about access to information and how that's either controlled or protected. And I'm wondering with these kind of civic tech initiatives that open data and the sharing of data is a baseline requirement or a nice to have.
I think transparency is key. It actually helps you leverage what other governments have done, what communities have done, and what you've maybe done, so that it can be built on and riffed on. When we talk about concepts and things, legal compliance, regulatory protection, and privacy, that's another role that, again, government has these experts in those domains, but is still transitioning towards understanding how these domains apply to new technologies. Things like open source, cloud, or iteration. This actually is an opportunity for those experts to join with fellowship teams, sort of see what they're doing and saying, okay, I see how we could do that. It works in this paper world or this other online service, and now we can translate it, but working together.
Is there a demand there on the citizen side? Because I think, when data is locked away in like file folders and old processes, it's one thing, but I think the average consumer knows that if information is digital, they should be able to get it on their phone. So are they pushing for that maybe harder than the government's used to?
Well, I think the government, all these different departments want to open up their data. Sometimes it's locked up in paper, sometimes it's locked up in spreadsheets. It's just arranged wrong, and they really, or it's not in a database, it's not an API, and it's really just, so what are the new standards for how we design systems, for how we design data, so that it can actually be shared meaningfully, as in it's not just sort of something useless. And I remember years back when I showed up on a Sunday afternoon and people were, trying to figure out how to visualize, I think it was the City of Toronto's budget. And we were, I was looking at the source data and I was thinking, it's probably not set up for visualization. And so that suddenly government becomes inspired. Oh, if we're going to share, we actually have to prepare our data so that it can be used, and it's not something that has to be processed a million times to get a little result from it. So we
it does take a lot of like elected official or executive commitment to release information on open data that, because like on the one hand you might want to put information out that tells the story that you want, like that's communications in a lot of ways. But it tends to be kind of the relatively controversial data sets and the relatively controversial issues that get the most engagement from community, and that community wants to engage with that kind of information to develop tools to help people understand complex and controversial issues. So like the city recently, I think we're the first one in like the US or Canada to enshrine the International Open Data Charter into like city work, which means like open by default, not open by convenience. If there's not like a privacy issue or like a data license issue, it's not open if it's the story that we want to tell. It's open by default. And I think if cities make commitments to releasing data sets that are controversial and in scary places, that just continues to increase, I think, that transparency and hopefully trust, but then also I think better tools, because those are the things that people really care about. Matt?
I'd like to start on something else. I was wondering if, and this is for anyone, if you could talk a little bit about what the program and the government, I guess, will be doing to, I guess, sort of encourage a range of fellows and members of the tech community, rather, from different ethnic communities, different economic backgrounds, genders, and that sort of thing.
Sure, that's really important for us. It's Code for Canada, and we think of it as Code for all Canada. Obviously, we're starting the fellowship program here in Ontario, but hoping to grow that very quickly, and that we're totally fully anticipating and doing significant outreach to make sure that we have applications from fellows from all across the country, with backgrounds in technology, in design, in product management, in data analysis, in a range of those digital skills that they'll need, and that we're making the connections to reach into communities that might not be the first ones to submit their application to participate. So yeah.
Yeah, follow-up question, Matt? Yes.
I'm wondering if you guys can talk about the lasting change that we'll see in the Ontario government a year from now after this partnership has been rolling.
I give it a shot. I mentioned a little bit of this in my remarks earlier, that the fellowship program in Code for Canada overall is going to help stand up a bunch more digital government projects and services. But probably even more impactful will be that we're showing that it's possible, that we're going to be deploying these projects and telling their story, both internally and externally, to help empower more of those innovators in government who are excited about working differently and aren't currently sure how to do it. So that whether they choose to hire fellows or not, whether they choose to collaborate with the civic tech community or not, that they're seeing projects around them in other parts of the OPS take different approaches, whether it's to who they hire, to the processes they're using, to how they're purchasing, that there are many more of those stories for us to point to that will inspire more stuff to happen across the province.
I'm personally looking for a couple of outcomes. I mean, the first is, we make some real things that make life easier for people. That would be pretty amazing, and that the public servants who work with the fellows feel confident, and other public servants see them and feel confident about trying a different thing, trying a new approach, trying new set of tools. And the other outcome I'm hoping for is, as you bring these top technologists into government, actually manage to push through that and you help somebody, there's no better feeling. And so I think that second outcome is I'm hoping that these technologists sort of hear the call of public service and join us.
So unfortunately, we're running a little bit behind schedule. But one thing as a former journalist, I always would hate if people cut me off before I ask my last question. So I just want to give our journalists here one more round of questions. So quick question, quick answer, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay, so I think it was Andy Best was talking about disrupting kind of the procurement RFP thing, which I think is super interesting because anyone in tech community doesn't really know the inner mysterious workings of getting something approved. But it seemed like the outcomes were like, if we do hackathons and meetup groups, that solves the problem. Is it that simple, or is there an element of the, it's not a fellowship, it's more ambassadorial between tech communities? And I want to flag that I noticed Lighthouse Labs and some other coding schools as digital literacy blows up in the city and the province and the country, if they can play a role in that.
Well, one of the things that I think we found is that it's a kind of an all of the above approach where you get it's citizen-led civic tech involvement that's happening, and then you have fellowship programs, and then you also have you end up start hiring for those people. You see those successes of people that you don't have skill sets for, not maybe people who don't have machine learning experience in government, or people who don't have Python experience, and people start working with, let's say the open data, you see what's possible, and so there's a little bit about maturity, it starts outside usually, then you start to bring it in maybe with a fellowship, then you start to staff up to have those levels all the time, as you were saying earlier, but then all of those I think are happening all the time, ideally in a really robust environment.
Someone had mentioned earlier that one of the, challenges is finding teams that are willing to sort of embrace, a new sort of set of digital skills, or teams that are willing to embrace sort of the talent that brings those skills. I was wondering if you could maybe just quickly define, what does a team look like that is ready to kind of embrace, or what qualities would such a team have that's ready to kind of embrace this new way of working?
I can do a short version. So, when we think about the kinds of places that digital professionals want to work, we think of places like this, right? And Shopify absolutely has been very successful, put a lot of effort in, and been very successful in hiring people and being one of those employers of choice. So I think that there are some things that Shopify can do that government can't, and I think it's going to be a learning process for us to figure out what are the parts that we can import. It probably doesn't start with a ping pong table, it may start somewhere else. It may end up with a ping pong table, we don't know. But to figure out how do we import some of those, some of what we've learned from places like Shopify to into government, what's going to work and what's not going to work. Looking at examples from abroad, certainly that that's one of the really great parts of the experience that Hillary's going to be bringing as the Chief Digital Officer. I think that that's a space where we're going to need to learn.
I think the ideal team in government for a fellowship team to work with is, everything else is sort of gravy, but if that team cares about their users, everything else can be sorted out. And so when I think of the ideal team, because we just finished a whole project with them, is the OSAP team, because it is their life's work to help people get post-secondary education. And so as soon as they have that, and when they first met people in digital, they were like, you guys are a little bit weird. But we just sat down, we listened to every detail, they knew their work inside out, and then they were keen to understand what we brought to the table. So honestly, I just think it's like an openness, trying something new, but a deep and abiding devotion to the users that they serve, and then everything else can be sorted out.
I guess if there's one thing about bureaucratic culture that you could change to make things easier, what would it be? Just one.
The lightning round.
procurement. That's often one of the things that, everything that we are hearing from Guelph is pretty much true in every level of government, and that's a major kind of hurdle for organizations, but it's also, it's great working in the public sector because you can share your innovations in ways that the private sector has secrets, and they keep things from each other for competitive advantage. But in government, if somebody's figured out how to do procurement, you can just borrow the admin directive.
I think access. I think when fellows walk into government departments, we often not only work differently, but we look really different from people who typically work in government. And sometimes what that creates is a wariness or a fear of sharing information, particularly data or access to servers, for fear that we might break it. And so I think that is the one piece, and that takes time. It takes trust and it takes building relationships. But if you can start with some of those in place, I think that access is really critical.
I'll say HR. That governments need newer, better tools for attracting and retaining really great digital talent.
I think for me it's helping people not be afraid to try new things. People think, oh, if I try a new thing, something bad will happen. So I'm just going to keep doing it this way, the way it's always been done for the last 50 years. Getting them to just feel comfortable with that change. Because I actually do believe the solutions to so many problems are already inside government, in people, just trapped in their minds, so they don't want to say it. So we can create a space where people feel safe and people want to try a new thing, and we've got other people with them saying, well, we'll be with you when this happens, so don't worry. I think that will go a long way to changing government.
Great, thank you all. Thanks everyone who came, thanks everyone who stayed. Thanks everyone who's watching on the live stream. So thank you, Jessica, thank you, Matt, thank you, Doug, thank you, Zeena, thank you, David, thank you, Becca, and thank you, Gabe. We're going to bring Charles back up just to wrap things up, and that's it. So thanks a lot, guys.